So let's talk about how you can shoulder max in 2026 because the shoulders alongside your neck are arguably the single most important muscle group for your physique and your aesthetics in general. So we're going to cover some black pills about shoulder training, delt training, and what it cannot compensate for and how to get cap delts. And then we're going to go over some training tips on how you can actually develop your shoulders effectively throughout 2026. So yeah, let's get started. So first black pill about shoulder training is that deltoid training can never compensate for having narrow clavicles. And this should be pretty obvious, right? Because sure, like this is still the best course of action for you to do, right? If you have narrow clavicles, then the best course of action should still be to gym cell and develop your shoulders, but just know that it will never compensate for it, right? This is Casing Granger, and you can see, right, he has pretty good shoulders. Like he built up his shoulders pretty well, actually. He has decent size, but it's simply just not enough to compensate for his structure, right? If you look at his structure, you can still kind of see that, okay, this guy has a long neck and narrow clavicles. Another example is this guy, right? You can see, right, this is a bit brutal, but just from his bone structure, he has, again, just like Casing Granger, a long neck, narrow clavicles type bone structure. And even if you gym cell effectively for many years, it's still not going to be enough to fully compensate and mask your bone structure, right? Especially compared to someone like David Lade, who has a naturally wide frame. So you have to be realistic with specifically your bideltoid gains after the first 1 to 2 years, right? Because the first 1 to 2 years, that's when you're really going to get most of your, like probably like 70 to even 80% of your shoulder gains. And after that, the rate at which you can gain shoulder mass, especially by deltoid, is very slow, right? You might have to take an extra, like after the first, let's say 1 to 3 years, it might take you an extra 6 to 7 years to even gain 1 inch of bideltoid. So you have to be realistic with how much you can actually gain from how much bideltoid you can actually gain from training your shoulders. So that's why I actually recommend in many of my videos to just fraud max, right? Fraud maxing, specifically height frauding and frame frauding, are basically the most effective ways that you can improve your physique. Excuse me. Because like I said, right, after the first 1 to 2 years, it's gonna take you like an extra 6 to 7 years to even gain 1 inch of total bideltoid. Whereas you can just spend $20 right, on some shoulder pads, decent shoulder pads, and that's gonna save you 6 to 7 years of extra gym selling and make the biggest difference in how your physique looks when you're in clothes. So this is the specific product I would recommend. This is a Korean frame frauding shirt. So it's basically like an undershirt, but it has a shoulder pad woven into it, right? I got one myself, and you have to buy it specifically from a Korean website and use what's called a forwarding service. So it's a forwarding service is they'll buy it for you in Korea and they'll send it to a warehouse in Busan and then they'll ship it for you overseas. So if you want more information on how to get this, you can go check out the link in the description where I talk more about it in the BP Fitness system. And personally, in my opinion, this is the best way to frame fraud, right? Because you have all these other shoulder pads that you kind of stick onto your shoulder, but you might have to worry about them falling out, or after a few uses, they simply just don't stick to your shoulders anymore, or they look a lot more obvious. Whereas this, even if you take off your clothes, right, people might not even see that you have a shoulder pad woven into your shirt, especially if you can take it off really quickly. So yeah, this is my recommendation for frame frauding. And yeah, first black pill is you just have to be realistic. And if you have narrow clavicles, then I would seriously recommend you consider frame frauding. Second black pill, or just the truth in general about shoulder training, is that the key to having, delts that look like this, that look capped, as the gym cells would say, is simply just being lean, right? Lean is law, and specifically for your physique, you can have really nice shoulders, right? Well-developed shoulders, but if you're not lean, then they kind of will just blend into your arm and they won't look that impressive. Whereas if you have decent shoulders and you actually get lean, that's what actually going to cause them to pop out like this and make your physique look a lot more impressive. And yeah, you can be someone with less shoulder muscles, but if you are lean, then it's going to look more impressive than someone who has bigger shoulder muscles, but they're at a higher body fat. That's also why a lot of these gym cells, or just, okay, maybe not powerlifting gym cells, but gym cells who care a lot about the overhead press, they actually have pretty good shoulder size, but because they're just really fat, their physique just does not look very impressive at all, and their shoulders just don't look that impressive as well. So yeah, once you build up your shoulders, you should be getting lean, unless you are in really cold weather, right? Because again, if you're really lean, you're still gonna sacrifice some of your frame. So it depends on which situation you're in. If you're in really cold weather and you're always wearing a lot of clothes, then it might make sense for you to be less lean so that you can amplify your frame. Whereas if you're in the weather where you're always wearing a tank top or you're always shirtless, then yeah, you should go ahead, get lean so that you can have shoulders that pop out and have a more impressive physique. So yeah, that's just the two black pills aside. Now let's talk about some of the actual training tips. And we're gonna start by talking about the most underrated shoulder exercise, the most underrated side delt exercise, which is gonna be a shoulder press in the frontal to scapular plane, right? If you look at this study, you can see that when they compare a frontal plane shoulder press, which just means shoulder press with your arms out to the side like that, to a lateral raise, there's basically like a 2% difference in side delt activation, right? So you can see this is shoulder press, this is lateral raise, and this is comparison for the side delts. And it basically has the same activation as the side lateral raises for the side delt. And again, this is especially if you're in the frontal plane, but even if you are in the scapular plane where your arms are a bit more in front of you, that's still gonna give you a ton of side delts. So what this is saying is basically whenever you're doing some kind of shoulder press with your palms facing forward, that's going to be basically just as effective for your side delts as a lateral raise would be. And in my opinion, this is probably the most underrated side delt exercise. Then it's something that you should be doing and progressing throughout the whole year of 2026 if you're trying to shoulder max. And specifically, you have to train it differently than lateral raises, because lateral raises, sure, you can do lateral raises. You can easily train lateral raises to failure or 0 reps in reserve and do a ton of volume, and it's a lot easier to recover from. But specifically with shoulder press, right, it's basically going to train your front and side delts. You cannot train it always to failure or even always to 0 reps in reserve like you would lateral raises, because it's a lot more fatiguing, and yeah, you're just not going to be able to recover from it, especially if you are past the first 1 to 2 years of training, right? Let's say you can overhead press 60 kilos, right? If you're using a barbell, you can overhead press 60 kilos and you're no longer a beginner anymore. You have to start being more intentional with your reps in reserve training. In particular, you should be trying to keep your shoulder press at 1 rep in reserve, right? So you can use a lower rep range like 4 to 8 or even 4 to 6 so that it's easier to gauge reps in reserve, but you should be aiming for 1 rep in reserve. And what that is going to do is it's going to basically make it a lot less stressful, make the workout a lot less stressful, and it's also going to give you the best progressive overload because you're ensuring that you have proper recovery, right? If you're training shoulder press and you find that you're stuck on, let's say, 75 kilos on the shoulder press machine for 6 reps and you've been stuck there for the last month or so, even 2 months, that's when you know you have to start doing reps in reserve training. And that's personally what allowed me to start progressing in the shoulder press again after I plateaued, is just by leaving 1 rep in reserve. So let's say in this workout, you did 5 reps at a certain weight, right? You do 5 reps and you feel like you could do 0 more reps, right? That 5th rep was extremely hard, and you either do 5 reps and failed the 6th rep, or you did 5 reps and you knew that you couldn't do another rep. That means that that weight is your 5 rep max. So in the next workout, you should be doing 4 reps instead, and that is how 1 RIR will feel like. So that's a quick way that you can start using reps in reserve. And after you do 4 reps to 1 rep in reserve, you just keep repeating that until 4 reps feels like 2 reps in reserve, right? So it feels quite easy on the last rep. Then you increase by 1 rep, and then you go back to 1 rep in reserve. So instead of always training to failure, always training to 0 reps in reserve, always trying to add 1 more rep, you try your best to stick to 1 rep in reserve and only add 1 more rep if you feel that it's become too easy and it's going into 2 reps in reserve. So that's the first point, is doing a frontal. If you're doing a shoulder press with your palms facing forward in the workout, then you don't need to do a lateral raise in the same workout, because that is already training your side delts extremely effectively. And that's the key distinction. And by the way, you can go check out the BP Fitness System link in the description as well. And as for the rear delts, right, because people like to do a lot of reverse pec deck for the rear delts. But really for the rear delts, any kind of chest supported row is going to train the rear delts extremely well, basically just as well as a reverse pec deck would. So if you do a close grip chest supported row, that's mainly going to be the lats, upper lats specifically, and the rear delts. Whereas if you do a pronated wide grip chest supported row, that's going to be the traps and rear delts. So really, if you already have some kind of chest supported row in your workout, you don't need to do an extra reverse pec deck. And it's the same thing with progressing on the shoulder press, right? For the chest supported row, you should be using 1 rep in reserve and trying to progress as strong and get as strong as possible on it as well. So for 2026, if you are just trying to shoulder max, right, and build your shoulder as much as possible, you should be trying to add as much weight as possible throughout 2026 on your shoulder press. Let's say you add like 40, okay, maybe 30 pounds to your working weight on your shoulder press, and then you add like another like 50 pounds to your working weight on your chest supported row. That's how you're going to effectively shoulder max and build the majority of your shoulder size in 2026. And I like this approach more because lateral raises, you can't really progress that well. So you can't really tell if you're training effectively. Whereas if you're doing heavy compounds like shoulder presses and heavy rows, yeah, that's how you're gonna know you're progressing well and build up your shoulders really effectively in 2026. So if you found that helpful, you can go check out the BP Fitness System, link in the description, where I talk about how to use natural gym selling as one of the best soft maxes, how to assess your frame and bone structure, how to build your physique based on your bone structure, how to do some illusion strategies like clothing and style maxing, as well as just straight up fraud maxing strategies like height frauding 2, 3, even 4 inches, as well as frame frauding, and how to build muscle without aging yourself. That's a big topic. How to have low stress workouts, lean maxing strategies, diet guides, primal diet sourcing guides, as well as some health indicator guides. And lastly, once you figure out the best physique for your bone structure and you know how to build muscle without aging yourself, I'll just talk about the most up-to-date science-based training methods so that you can speed run to that physique as fast as possible. And this is kind of what it looks like when you're inside. I have videos, PDFs, more video presentations on style maxing and frame maxing, primal diet sourcing guides, some recipe guides for the primal diet as well, and yes, how to build muscle without aging yourself, as well as just some science-based training stuff like picking exercises, programming reps in reserve like we talked about, as well as just some other training methods that I would recommend. So if you're interested in that, go check it out, and I'll see you in the next video.